Don't judge a book by its cover, so the adage goes. The licensed deviant in me, the fool, the skeptic, rebels. Surely the cover means something. It's a text. It's communicating with the audience in more ways than are intentional. One unintentional message, if one browses the shelves at their local bookstore, if one has a local bookstore, is that many book covers aren't too appealing. Writers should hope no one judges their work by its cover. Of course, the writer likely had nothing to do with the cover, and isn't that a revealing fact? The book cover, not an insignificant part of the reading experience, like much of healthcare and education today, is in the hands of the professionals. Don't ask too many questions. Just take what we give you. That's the attitude anyways. In this, the reader and writer of the mass-produced book share much in common. Both are submitting choice and ultimately culture to a machine, perhaps the machine. I got onto book covers in part because my own work has been ignored by both literary journals and publishers, and therefore the job was given to me. There was a time when I would have had a good cry over this rejection, but now I view it as an annoyance that strengthens the hermetic stress that grounds our entire notion of great literature and art. And so I grew from a reader to a writer, a spurned lover to a righteous crank, a seeker of a publishing apparatus to a creator of one. Along the way, I learned a few things about writing and publishing and designing. I'd like the money of the big apparatus, its army of promoters, but then who really likes an army? A writer, by his very nature, is a fierce individualist. Doubtless the big apparatus corrupts, as does anything that takes you away from yourself. I say all this to reveal the person behind the pen, to ground my criticism, and to give you, the reader, enough ad hominem fodder to dismiss it. It's important that we don't take our positions too seriously, and we're always willing to interrogate them. It's also important that we're forced to consider biases. Recently, 2 writers that I know in a very limited capacity published books that have received much critical praise and the full blitz of the apparatus. Both writers are Korean women writing in English, and while their novels are different, sharing only Korean characters, their book covers are strikingly similar. Take a look at Julie Min's Shanghailanders and Minnie Lee's 8 Lives of a Century-Old Trickster. At first glance, maybe you disagree with my claim of similarity, but you can't ignore the single Asian eye that features prominently in both. Why the eye? Is this the most Asian of facial features and therefore will convey immediately that this book contains Asians? And why is that important? There are implications here, surely. Little did I know Min and Lee were just the tip of the so-called spear, and the spear was the message. The industry, the apparatus, the machine was trying to tell me, a reader of English from the West, something about Asians and what is worth reading. Around the same time these eyes were staring into mine, Han Kang won the Nobel Prize for Literature. I had mostly forgotten about Han Kang after reading her much-lauded The Vegetarian and failing to hear the applause. What had she been up to? I wondered, and there, at the start of my search, was the same eye. Greek Lessons, published in English translation in 2024, presents the reader with the same fragmented eye in 2 different covers. The eye is essential, apparently. These writers aren't alone in their carrying of the Asian eye motif. J. Caspian Kang's 2021 nonfiction work about Asian America, The Loneliest Americans, also includes the eye on one of its covers. Although there appears to be a single hand at work here, and metaphorically that might be the case, all of these covers were created by different people, though all would appear to be Western. Kyung-Suk Shin, writer of the best-selling Please Look After Mom, is a prolific spreader of the eye. At least 3 of her novels contain it. The above are all books by Korean or Korean American writers, but the motif is not limited to Koreans. It's a pan-Asian presentation to the West. We shouldn't forget that the audience is the West, English speakers, mostly female. The virus metaphor is helpful when considering literature and its cultural and therefore behavioral implications. In this model, the literary work is a product of a variant already shaped by previous variants. Its adaptations are dialectically responding to its host. The history of literature, which includes its book covers, is one of struggle between the variant shaping its host and the host shaping the variants. Doubtless, our most exciting literature is the result of the former, a variant that radically changes the host, and our dullest the product of the host dictating the variant, also known as audience capture. Other popular works that proliferate a variation of the cyclopian Asian eye is the original Asian American immigrant memoir, The Woman Warrior, by Maxine Hong Kingston. Similarly, Gish Jen's Typical American has it. Jean Luan Yang's popular graphic novel, American-Born Chinese, I. Lisa See, not an Asian writer, but a writer about Asians, is an interesting test case. Almost as eye-prolific as Kyung Suk Shin, she has at least 2 works featuring the eye, Dreams of Joy and The Tea Girl of Hummingbird Lane. Filipino-American writer Mia Alvar's In the Country, In the Eye. Vanessa Hua's A River of Stars, I Again. Lan Samantha Chang's novel Inheritance, well, that's one word for it. Ha Jin's The Crazed has the eye, but worst, Everyman's Library's edition of Waden created the familiar eye cover using a photograph of Ha Jin himself, reduced to an eye. Even some immensely popular writers get the eye treatment. Haruki Murakami's Killin' Commendador has it, and so does Kevin Kwan's Crazy Rich Asians, albeit a sleight of hand version in sunglasses. It's interesting and revealing to study book covers that forego the now familiar eye, books where you might now expect to see it. Min Jin Lee's very popular Pachinko, Cho Namju's Kim Ji-young's Born 1982, and Chung-rae Lee's On Such a Full Sea all contain Asian faces on their covers without any features at all. In lieu of the eye, readers get the featureless face. It would almost seem that the implied logic is that the Asian's eye is the only Asian feature, and so minus the eye, there's nothing left. Hair is a possible substitute, but less obviously Asian than the eye. Relatedly, Chung-rae Lee's Native Speaker contains an overexposed face that is almost featureless, except for a pair of Asian eyes, and yet his novel that features no Asian characters, Aloft, is free of the eye or any person. Kazuo Ishiguro, a writer like Chung-rae Lee, who is brave enough to write about people outside his racial group, does so in Never Let Me Go. The covers for this novel contain the full body or full face of their Western female protagonist. And the most recent has a strikingly similar close-up face motif, but both the eyes are present, as well as a nose and lip. In short, the identifying characteristic is not limited to an odd eye. Further supporting this logic from the other end, the cover of Kim Yong-ha's 2006 novel, Your Republic is Calling You, features 2 eyes in the abstract, one representing North Korea, the other South, the nation, the people, all in a single eye. Eyes have and continue to have wide-ranging symbolic significance, not least as a portal to another, often mental world. The essence of life, one's fire, is held in the eye. While the chin may be the most human of body parts, the eye is the most living. Sexual connotations of the eye abound. It's the site of eroticism. As an orifice, it suggests the sexual, and in looks resembles the female sex organ. Closely related to the erotic are its power associations. the all-seeing eye of Providence, the eye of Horus and Ra, the panopticon, the unfeeling police state of the surveillance camera, all are eyes that expose and therefore know, and thereby gain a certain measure of power. But the cyclopian Asian eye does not signal power. It is a construction of the stereotype, a fulfillment of the host expectations. It is there to reassure, to let its audience know that they're on unfamiliar ground. This is the exotic without any fear. Ironically, Henry Woong-jae Kong's Chink, Thinking Beyond the Stereotype, a book about Western stereotypes of Asians, displays the identical cyclopean Asian eye motif that adorns the books already mentioned. The cyclopean Asian eye appearing on books about Asians for a Western audience is not a random occurrence. It's not arbitrary. In part, it's a reflection of a lack of creativity, but it's also more than that. It's a monologue, and it's the contrary of what it professes to say. This trend is an ideological move to reimagine the canon. Put crudely, there's a deliberate attempt to publish more books by authors of specific ethnic and cultural backgrounds. And yet this attempt to broaden the understanding and presentation of the world through fictional explorations of diverse experiences is belied by the simplistic signaling of who these people are, the ones with the strange eyes. That doesn't quite make my point. Let me try it another way. These people, the readers, have never been anywhere. They've never shat in a squatter toilet, never saw the bisected carcass of a dog for sale in the local market, never leapt over frozen piss in the alley on their morning walk to work, never awoke to their face reflected in a storefront window, shocked by how odd it looked in comparison to the passers-by, never shared the sidewalk with an endless stream of motorbikes. These readers never bowed and really meant it, or continue to shake hands with their free hand supporting their elbow. They've never ate soup that smells like sour clothes on the regular and felt energized by it. They're full of shit, and the book covers say as much. You're full of shit, and we're here to keep you full. But does the cover say anything about the book itself? Does a trite cover reflect a trite story? After all, the cover is partly the delivery mechanism of the book, the story. Even if it was completely blank, mute, it would still communicate something about the story. What does it say that an increasing number of Asian stories for English readers have increasingly similar covers? Is this a single story? A single message akin to the talking points echoed across legacy media? Are the stories themselves increasingly similar? Are they feeding an audience something specific they've been told they like? We don't personalize our pizza boxes or our ice cream cartons after all. Why personalize the cover of the story? Or maybe it's that the story themselves don't offer enough conceptual imagery to be depicted visually on the cover. The opposite could also be true. As I Lay Dying has had some pretty bad book covers in the past 20 years, especially when compared to its thoughtful and attractive original cover. However, even the latter fails to communicate the complexities and richness of the novel. It merely suggests a few themes, some circumstances of the plot. But the images on all those covers are linked to coffins, death, dirt roads, or horses. That is, all elements from the story. In this, the covers are specific and concrete and representing some part of the story, arguably an essential part, regardless of how ugly they may be. Can the same be said of the Asian novels for English speakers? Assuming the cyclopean Asian eye books are not commenting on the Illuminati or the power of surveillance. They all seem to be saying, here's the Asian experience, and this is where the problem lies. This is the omission, the quiet part allowed. They've been selected for this and only this, regardless of how much more they may be. Taken together, these covers are stunning, and not in a way worthy of praise. But this level of conformity of groupthink is not an intentional move, like the yellow stars of Nazi Germany. No, here is an unintended signal for consumers, which doubles as an indicator of a species of affirmative action. For this reason, the covers won't be around for long, even if some of the stories they represent do have cultural importance and therefore longevity. There's a tyranny here, however, for both the readers and the writers. The Asian experience is a phantom, a hollow vessel, noisy because empty. It's just as spurious as the Irish experience being sought in Joyce's Dubliners, or any other group experience that's claimed to be distilled in a work of fiction. And all the worse when this phantom is selected for by the host or fed to it like addictive but unhealthy food. This is not the function of literature. Literature captures the interior life, not the national life, which isn't worth capturing no matter how grand it may seem. The novel grew into a vacuum created by the invention of modern science, which is an attempt to describe the external world and explain it through causation, measurement, and mathematics. This is the world of Oedipus, the world of the investigation that leads to personal horror. The novel, on the other hand, explores the world unmeasured by science, the inexplicable. The novel is an attempt to define the mysterious. The mysterious is common to all, an essential part of human life, though known to few. It is for this reason that despite traveling in a vehicle of specific culture, the literary work's destination always transcends to the universal. It reflects the littleness of our cultural and national identities. In short, I contend that the cyclopian Asian eye is a stereotyping artifact that ironically arose from a Western cultural perception that the collective tastes were not diverse enough, which very well was likely true and still is, and therefore there was a need to specifically select for works by those who did not look like the ones writing many of the books. While this urge toward diversity is great, it's doomed from the start for the irrelevancy of the vehicle to the destination. It also skews toward the surface, toward the superficial, and forces both readers and writers to conform to emotional insincerity, the counterside of the emotional sincerity that Orwell identified as being more important to the creative writer than truth. There is emotional insincerity when a writer accepts alien expectations, in this case, capturing the experience of a group of people, an imagined community, instead of a universal theme. And there is emotional insincerity when readers take the same bait. This is not a criticism of the works themselves, many of which very well may be works of importance, of literature. Nonetheless, the writers and their works, a pairing that should not be given too much attention, get swept up in a do-gooder wave that is political, not literary, and both suffer for it. The covers tell the story.